Let's bring in Ned Price, former special assistant, NSC spokesperson, and senior director for the Obama administration. What is your reaction, Ned?
I think you said it, Alex. It's pretty extraordinary news. And I think to my mind, it raises two important questions. Number one pertains to Israel. What exactly are Bibi Netanyahu's plans, intentions, and goals with this operation? But number two, and just as importantly, where does the Trump administration stand on all of this? We've heard contradictory signals, starting with the Israeli question. Look, Prime Minister Netanyahu and his ministers over the past 72 or 96 hours or so have maintained that this is an operation about defanging the Iranian nuclear program, going after nuclear infrastructure, going after nuclear scientists, going after military leaders as part of Israel's effort to defend itself from what they, I think, rightly deem to be an existential threat to Israel if Iran were in a position to acquire a nuclear weapon. But this kind of reporting, coupled with other reporting that we've seen that they've gone after or have sought to go after political leaders, I think raises a pretty disturbing question that this may not be purely about Iran's nuclear program, but this may be an effort to achieve regime change in Iran. That's something that the Israeli government has denied. But the more we learn, I think it's becoming clearer and clearer that may at least have been an initial objective of this. Whether they're able to achieve it, especially with the reported American intransigence, I think is another question. But that does take us to the United States. And where exactly is the Trump administration in all of this? And I think as we've looked at President Trump's statements in the immediate hours before the Israeli operation started to just over the past couple hours, we've seen contradictory signals. President Trump initially said no, he didn't want Israel to go against Iran while diplomacy was ongoing. He later called the initial effects of Israel's operation excellent. After speaking with President Putin, he said he wants this war to end. And more recently, he has voiced encouraging noises about Israel needing to go after Iran's nuclear program. It's not just about contradictory messages and signals. This actually matters when it comes to foreign policy and America's influence in the world, because when we're contradictory, when countries and entities don't know where we stand, they won't respect the word of the United States. They won't respect what comes out of the Oval Office. And unfortunately, I think we've seen that. Go ahead, Alex. No,
which plays right into my question in terms of Bibi Netanyahu saying he was not going to wait anymore for the talks that the U.S. was conducting. Is this exactly what you're saying?
It's exactly what I'm saying. And it's pretty remarkable to have heard that from the Israeli prime minister. Look, I think when you take a step back and you assess Israel's operation and their initial impetus, it's very clear that in the first instance, they were going after the Iranian nuclear program, of course. But when you start to peel back and to ask the question why, I think it's impossible but to conclude that even though Iran's nuclear program was target number one, Israel very clearly took aim at the Trump administration's own diplomatic effort. They did not want to see this go forward. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, even hours, minutes before the operation began, President Trump was saying he did not want to see Israel strike Iran while diplomacy was ongoing. And you have to remember, on Thursday, in the hours before this took place, Steve Witkoff, the president's special envoy, was supposed to meet with the Iranian foreign minister in Muscat today, just days later. Clearly, this diplomatic effort made the Israelis very nervous. Whether they were nervous that it would fail and Iran would be in a position to acquire a nuclear weapon, or I think more plausibly in some ways, they were concerned that it would succeed and that it would render what in their mind, what would have been a bad deal. I think either one of those could have been the final straw for Israel to go forward.
The fact that Israel was saying they were targeting the supreme leader, does that suggest to you they could get him if they wanted to? And the surprise around that, and what if President Trump had not rejected the idea? What would we be looking at today?
Yeah, look, I think if you take a step back and survey the past 3 years, one thing we should not do is underestimate the capabilities of the Israeli military and Israeli intelligence. And I think we've seen example after example from Hassan Nasrallah to the Quds Force commander, to Ismail Haniyeh, the now deceased leader of Hamas, who was really ingeniously taken out inside Tehran in a guest house of the Iranian government just last year. My sense is that if Israel wanted to go after the supreme leader, they could have gotten him. And Israel has time and again proven itself capable. But there is a difference between can and should. And I think this gets to your question. Just because Israel was in a position to go after the supreme leader, should they have done so? This is already a tinderbox. And unfortunately, we are seeing missiles and munitions and drones rain over Israel, just as they are doing so over the skies of Iran.
Ned, let me ask you, how were those missiles, drones able to break through Israel's Iron Dome? It is typically ironclad, keeping missiles or rockets from breaking through.
It is very effective, but no system, including the Iron Dome and David Sling, is foolproof. And typically, when we saw this, unfortunately, twice during 2024, when there was an exchange of fire between Israel and Iran, there's a very high success rate, but it is not 100%. And what we saw over the course of last year, somewhere around 5% of drones and missiles were able to get through. That is what I think we're seeing now. It's also a question in my mind just how coordinated the United States and Israel are. Look, I can tell you, Alex, in the Biden administration, we spent a good amount of time and effort coordinating closely at an intelligence level, at a military level, and a political level with our Israeli counterparts. And we were able together to effectively shoot down almost all of those munitions, whether ballistic missiles or drones. I don't know yet whether the success rate here is equivalent to that, if it's less than that. But it is very clear that no system is foolproof, and we're seeing the tragic consequences of that, which is all part of this potential for a broader conflagration. It's in no one's interest to see this conflict spiral even more than it has.
I have one more question for you, Ned, and that is there a purpose in this leak of information from the White House saying that the president rejected Israel's Bibi Netanyahu's request or saying, you know, we're going to take out the Ayatollah? What's that about, the leak?
There's always an ulterior motivation, and we don't need to be a criminologist here to understand that the White House is in a very difficult political dynamic. On the one hand, they feel that it's necessary to stand with Israel, to support Israel. That's in part, at least, why President Trump has himself said that we're going to continue to work with the Israelis to shoot down these drones and ballistic missiles. But there's a very powerful political strain that President Trump listens to, his MAGA base. And this is the so-called America First base, the base that at this very moment is questioning why the United States is engaged, even in the limited way we are, to help Israel defend itself. And I think what we're hearing from this White House, these whispers that the Israelis wanted to go further and faster and do something even more dramatic, but President Trump vetoed it, is a very purposeful leak to signal to that MAGA base that President Trump is going to defend Israel, but we have our limits, and we're not going to be drawn into a broader war. Look, I hope that remains the case, that we won't be drawn in. But President Trump, time and again, has shown that he's mercurial, and the last person he talks to typically wins the argument. So I hope those principles remain. I hope the United States continues to stand with Israel to help it defend itself, but will resist being dragged into something that I think could be very violent, very ugly, and unfortunately very deadly.